Ken Fowler here from Cymani, which, as Sam said, is the Cybersecurity Manufacturing and Innovation Institute, which is a relatively new organization. So I wanted to start with Ken just saying a few words about who he is and who Cymani is, and we'll start with that, okay?
Great. Thank you, everybody. I'm Ken Fowler. I'm the COO and CISO for Cymani, the Cybersecurity Manufacturing Innovation Institute. As Sam said earlier, there's a number of these manufacturing innovation institutes. Some are funded by the Department of Defense, some are funded by the Department of Energy, and one is funded by NIST. We happen to be funded by the Department of Energy. We're just now beginning our second budget period. Our primary focus is on developing cyber-informed, secure by design architectures to secure U.S. manufacturers. So we focus primarily on developing those manufacturing architectures. Additionally, we have a role to play in the reduction of both energy usage and emissions as well. So we also are developing capability to measure in a phrase that we've created called SEEK, which is cybersecurity, energy, and emissions quantification. So we can actually measure and determine how things are operating. We're also very heavily invested in training as well for cybersecurity reasons. We're also developing a training and demonstration facility in San Antonio. We are hosted by the University of Texas San Antonio. I'm actually a UTSA employee myself. We have partnerships with 3 national labs: Idaho National Labs, Sandia National Labs, and Oak Ridge National Labs. We're in partnership with over 20 universities. We have about 170 researchers today that are supporting this activity. So,
great. Thanks, Ken. Good introduction. And no notes. That was really good. Do we have any questions from the audience before we get started? We have Sid back here with a microphone, so please don't be shy. Like I tell everybody, we have all these experts here. You know, this is your one chance to ask any question, and there's no such thing as a dumb question. So think about that while I ask the first question here. It seems to me most of the efforts around implementing good cybersecurity today have primarily been voluntary, right? With the exception of the electric power industry, which has to, answer to the NERC-CIP regulatory and reporting framework. Most of the stuff that we see happening in industry is pretty much voluntary. And I'm sure a lot of manufacturers now see cybersecurity incidents as a source of major unplanned downtime. So it is in their best interest, to have good cybersecurity programs and policies and technologies and so forth. Do we see a change in the regulatory environment happening, however? Do we think that regulations are going to become more stringent? I know with the Biden administration, we had some new reporting requirements, in the wake of Colonial Pipeline. Any comments on where the regulatory environment is headed? Is that good or bad? What are your thoughts on that? Anybody feel free to jump in.
So for me, I've been working on wireless gas detection for 10 years.
Move a little bit closer because I don't think they can hear you.
Yeah, so I've been working on this wireless gas detection for 10 years, and I spent 10 years talking about that it's connecting and it's being able to transmit the signals. But it started 3 months ago. We're doing a project in Israel, and suddenly they trust in the wireless part of it. Now it's cybersecurity. So for the project in Israel, we actually have a third-party cybersecurity company flying in to Norway, doing pen tests, so we can't connect our system to an Israeli safety system without having a third-party cybersecurity penetration test at our location. So that's never happened before. It's only been on the communication. And then I visited ExxonMobil in Houston, and they also mainly talked about the safety levels. But the first question in the meeting from the TAs was cybersecurity, denial of service. So usually I travel with engineers that are good on wireless, but now for this conference I brought my cybersecurity engineer. So there's a big shift, and it's going fast as well, and they demand answers, and that's now the showstopper, documenting how secure you are and how you're doing it, and you're able to withstand certain amounts of attacks.
So I'll just cover myself by saying these are my opinions based on having worked for NERC for several years and been in the utility industry for a lot longer than that. Show of hands, who has ever heard the saying, compliance is not security? Okay, a lot of people have. Good. That is the reason why NERC SIP and TSA Security Directive number 2 did not appear anywhere on that slide with the standards-based piece. Is that they're compliance standards. They're not security standards. They're compliance standards that talk about security. And in the case of NERC SIP, where we are today, not necessarily where it started, they're reasonably good from a technical perspective, but they're not entirely sufficient. And the more I think about it, the more that I think that you're naturally going to get a drift where regulatory compliance standards will become more stringent slowly over time, but they're always going to be lagging. And that real security is going to remain to be driven at that farther edge, closer to where you need to be, by voluntary adoption of good standards-based approaches.
Excellent comment.
Yeah,
Andre?
yeah, I pretty much align with that. The cybersecurity is a distributed problem, and it has to be solved in a distributed way. So centralized regulations that, while fine, you still need implementation details and the readiness and enablement and all the other things that go with it, education, et cetera. There's other levers. The levers for adopting good cybersecurity includes insurance companies influencing it, procurement requirements from the asset owner operators, and then regulatory. So, I think the other two, the insurance, we're starting to see it bubble up. One of our certification bodies is FM Approvals. They work for FM Global, who insures products and sites. And so their intention is to get their certification program working, and then they're going to circle back and start offering insurance for their customers.
Yeah, all good comments. I echo that sentiment too. NERC SIP is a regulatory and reporting framework. It's not a cybersecurity standard, so they tell you what you need to do. They don't tell you how to do any of that stuff. To me, 62443 is really the standard of reference that tells you how to do those things and how to do them, the right way in your organization. But it does seem, that we're going to probably have an increasingly stringent regulatory environment moving forward with everything that's happening. Any other questions from the audience? Yes. Can just tell us who you are and where you're from, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so my name is Ben Preer. I'm with Phoenix Contact. So I know Sam. We do a lot of stuff with NERC SIP. I work specifically in electric power. I've had some experience working with ISA and water, wastewater, and water in general. I know ISA is really big in the process. How do you see other industries? So NERC SIP is basically guidelines. We always say if you're doing the bare bones, what NERC SIP tells you to do, that's like the baseline. That doesn't guarantee you're going to be secure. So you're talking about ISA 99 and 62443. How do you see other industries? What do you think their reaction is going to be if they go down this road and they have to do that type of regulatory approach? And because it's not inexpensive, you talk to utility, they'll set aside a team of people, and that's all they do. And so water, wastewater, and electric power, one's generating a lot of money, one's costing a lot of money and not generating as much.
Yeah, that's some of that. The regulatory piece is unfortunate. When I worked at Deloitte & Touche in Raleigh for 10 years, and we were in the Carolina Power and Light building, and they had 2 full floors of regulatory affairs folks, lawyers, et cetera. And I think they go to sleep at night with a T-shirt that says no on the front and no on the back, and a pillowcase with it too. And that's their job, say no to everything, because anything new costs money. But in my dealings with that sector, I discovered, I was surprised a couple of years ago that there wasn't consensus specification on the procurement side for new technology. And in the last few months, I've been working with the North American Transmission Forum. They put together this supplier survey. They wanted to put a bunch of information in a central database that asset owners could use to make it more convenient for purchasing. And they did a pretty good job of designing that to actually put it in a database that everyone could access. That had governance issues, so that part didn't go. But everybody liked the questionnaire, and in fact, they said that the NERC SIP ERO blessed it or endorsed it as being equivalent to meeting NERC SIP if you answer those questions properly. So our follow-on work with them is to put a working group together and map 62443 to that questionnaire. And our hopes are that 62443 meets everything. Suppliers are excited about that because most of the suppliers are global suppliers. And if they're conformant to 62443, that meets NERC SIP, they're also using the same 62443 in Japan, Asia Pacific, and the EU. And so there's a lot of upside for them to be compliant to one standard that works everywhere around the globe. And so we're seeing more of that, like the DOE thing that you mentioned. And so on the supplier side, they're happy with this.
Any other questions? Sid.
It's not on. Now I'm on. I'm Sid Snitkin at ARC. But, you know, I understand everything everybody said, and for years we've been hearing the thing about NERC SIP and just compliance versus real security. And that, I don't question that's true. But I personally think, I've been saying for years, the time has come to start regulating cybersecurity, insisting, at least one thing NERC SIP has done, and maybe I just don't know it, they've insisted that people take it serious and do things. Now, they may not be doing the right thing, and I think that's what all the answers I've heard up there to Larry's question. That I wouldn't argue that. Maybe they could do a lot more, and compliance is not security, but it does enforce a certain consciousness of cybersecurity. It forces them to do certain things. I mean, the basic things like, you know, we talk to a lot of people, they'll say like, you know, they have a base plant or something, and so they cannot connect certain things, or they have to do certain things to isolate it. Now, maybe they aren't doing all the stuff on the inside, like an ISO, you know, an IEC 62443, I don't know. But I think there's still a benefit. I mean, personally, I happen to live near DC, so I work all the time around government people and things like that. And I do think that we're going to see a lot more regulation come out because the country's just going to get tired of it. It's the first time we have a major train problem that's going to come up. Colonial Pipeline is stimulating stuff in Department of Transportation, I think. So I personally think there's going to be more regulation. Now, whether that solves the problem, I don't know. I'm just saying I do think that there's going to be more. And I don't personally see that as a bad thing. Now, I don't have a company. I understand it's expensive, and a lot of it's probably wasted money just doing paperwork. But I think it's, so anyhow, I'm just expressing my view. Maybe I'm wrong, you know, so. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on my comment, but that's just my view.
While you're passing the mic, what I will say though is the very fact that NERC exists is fallout from the 1965 blackout, which had nothing to do with cyber, and the fact that NERC SIP, or excuse me, that NERC has mandatory enforcement authority with hefty financial penalties is a direct result of the 2003 Northeast blackout. So having these large catastrophic incidents absolutely is something that pulls regulation along behind it. In a perfect world, I think it would be better if people did it of their own volition. But I also am a realist, so that's not going to happen. It's better for society. It's worse for the company. At some point, that's what okay, we've had enough. That's how you get regulation. That's how I've seen it happen.
Yeah, I started into this in 2007, and back at that time, I was opposed to regulation. Today, I would like to see regulation. I don't think things are moving fast enough. That's the issue. You know, the regulation should say to fix it, but not be prescriptive about how, and let the answers come from the people in the trenches who really know how to solve the problems.
Well, if regulation does come, I hope it's good regulation, because I've read the TSA guidelines on pipeline cybersecurity, and it's pretty weak sauce, in my opinion. Especially when you have standards out there like 62443 that go into a lot more depth, you know, about the types of things you should be doing. And again, it's really basic stuff, like you should develop a cybersecurity program. you should do a cybersecurity assessment. You should determine which areas of your pipeline are critical versus non-critical. This is really, really basic stuff that everybody should already be doing, in my opinion. So I hope, if they do come along, they'll be effective regulations. We had one more question back here.
Yeah, hi, Rick Teen with Mission Secure. I was originally going to ask just more of a general question about the fact that it has concerned me greatly that so many people in the industry seem to accept being referred to as cyber defense, what is really just cyber monitoring. There's no actual defense capability to a lot of OT cyber, what are described as OT cyber defense systems. They're really just going to tell you what went wrong, not do anything about it. And I'm curious on your thoughts, but I think it also ties in a little bit with the compliance issues and having real standards that have some teeth. The example I'll give you is the IMO standards in maritime, which a lot of us were optimistic we're going to move the maritime industry, and they simply have they're not doing any enforcement on it. They're basically saying, if you do anything at all, you pass the new standard. And one guy, for example, we talked to who, his own insurance company was telling him, here, pay $5,000 to this company. They're going to hand you a self-assessment piece of paper. You're going to fill it out. They're going to file it, not do anything else, and we'll say that you're meeting the standard, which is kind of crazy. So just curious for thoughts on that. I agree definitely that things are moving slowly, and a lot of these companies are in a situation where they're saying, I know what I'm sorry to recognize what I should do, but until my competitors have to do it too, I'm putting myself at a competitive disadvantage if I'm the first one to spend money on this. And so just thoughts along those lines, I guess, about real defense versus not defense, or really low standards saying, hey, good job, you're cyber secure now, when you really haven't accomplished anything.
I'd like to comment on that a little bit if I could. So, this is a very complex thing, right? And I agree, it's not operating at the speed I think we'd all like, and it's going to take a much bigger investment, and hopefully we can find a way to accelerate that. But, one of the challenges is from a skill set standpoint, right? As a nation, we're not producing the numbers of people with cyber skills that we need to fill these voids that we have in industry and government from a cyber standpoint. And so that's a big impediment, right? Doesn't mean that everybody needs a 4-year degree to do that. And there's a lot of different entities that are invested in that. But I would encourage all of us to really try to prod things along much more quickly, because it's going to take more people as well as dollars to accelerate what we're all talking about here today.
Anyone else? Do we have another question? I have more questions. So we don't normally speak a lot about cybersecurity at the field device level, which is why I'm really glad we had your presentation here today, Adne. When cybersecurity vendors talk about devices, they're usually talking about PLCs or DCS controllers, not really field devices, right? Like gas detectors and things like that. And meanwhile, there aren't a lot of the field level protocols that incorporate any form of security, right? They were developed a long time ago before cybersecurity was really a concern. And they do bi-directional communications between systems and devices in the field. I thought you had some good examples in your presentation, like incorporating AES encryption, with ISA 100. Can you talk a little bit about that and other things that we can do to improve cybersecurity at the actual end device level?
Yes, so we are fortunate that we are using ISA 100, which is designed to be secure. So we get 128-bit encryption on the device, and we also get on the application of the communication layer. So it's a quite secure communication. It could have been, sometimes we get asked about 256 encryption, but basically that would require more data power to decrypt and encrypt when you're using it and put less data inside the packages. And for our communication, it's the effort of getting in would need to be a quantum computer. So for that reason, we are keeping us safe, and it's also we're using ISO 100 is IEE 815, not 811. So most of the hacking equipment that you can go in and hack normal wireless devices on the Wi-Fi, for example, will not be able to attack the systems we have. I knew we were secure before, but now with all the new requirements from the customers, we're actually needing to improve it. We also found that ISO 100 is very safe when you're using it, but there's identified some more weakness if you're doing over-the-air provisioning. So then there will be some keys available that you can potentially hack. So we needed to write into our standard when we're doing safety systems, it's only going to be offline provisioning to avoid that potential of getting it out. And it's also made us aware that the provisioning tools we are selling, normally a customer can order a provisioning tool that potentially could go in and connect to a device and read out some of the information. So we need to start following up on the equipment we are using as service tools, because it's basically only human interaction. They can, of course, jam our system, but that's not an attack because we have process safety time built into our system. But protecting the equipment that we use to work on it and how we program it is important. And then it's, again, working together with the customer to ensure no one can get in from the outside world, not from the wireless side. Because basically the wireless side, for now, we can't see any way of cracking it. Of course, someone is probably working on it right now, but getting the customer also to understand that the threats they are hearing maybe in one presentation is like denial of service and these topics, which is not relevant to our technology. It's just navigating, getting all the terms in line and having a common understanding about the risks and what they actually can do to the different systems. So it's a knowledge gap for us as well. So we need to educate ourselves, but also the customers to do the right questions and ask the right questions and make the chain. It's almost like I usually work with safety. So in safety integrity levels for safety, every point needs to has this risk reduction factor. And if one of the pieces are not SEAL2 capable, the entire loop has no safety. And that's the same feeling I get with cybersecurity. It's a continuous line of ticking off the boxes and having every piece being able to be certified together to keep it safe.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I love the example about your configuration tool that your customers can buy. You know who else can buy them? Bad people.
Anybody? Yeah.
Yeah.
I assume you're talking about like hard handheld devices and stuff like that.
So we use IR devices or plug-in devices, but
Yeah.
they are like Dave Keen, my guy. He found out like that's basically they can get the key out if they unscrew it and have that tool. So that's something we need to monitor.
Larry.
Yes.
Unless somebody.
Do we have another question or say?
No, yeah, I have a comment again.
Yeah, no
I'm
problem.
a talkative guy, as you can tell. No, but it was just the comment about the ISA 100. It seems like a great spec to protect anybody stealing information that's being transmitted wirelessly, injecting things. That sounds great. But in the end, if somebody does get the tool that you use to program the device, or today, like supply chain attacks, software supply chain attacks, and somebody says, I need to do an update to this leak detecting device that's changing the firmware in the device, that might get transmitted very securely right down to it and get into it. I think you're agreeing with that. You're saying that you're talking about the communication security, which is a key issue in wireless, obviously, but there's still that issue, and I thought that was what your question was really about, Larry. You have a device down there, and today the devices are smart devices with firmware in them, and if you have to update it because somebody finds something wrong with it and they update it and that was compromised, you're just compromising the device, and then you're just going to securely be able to cause problems. Is that right?
I think that's part of the issue. I mean, that's more like an insider threat with maybe somebody inadvertently, makes a change. I'm not sure what the likelihood is of somebody walking around, a refinery, to intelligent devices and deliberately, trying to mess with a device. And I don't. That's always a possibility, but again, if we're talking about likelihood versus consequence kind of thing, I would think the likelihood of that would be pretty slim, but I could be wrong.
And also again, because if you do any of the updates or any of the changes to the system, this is a SEAL integrity system, so there's an installation, maintenance, and operational manual with encryption keys and everything to get into the system, because we don't let anyone get into the system to change anything of that because it's calculated as is, and if we do a change, it needs to be revision control and who's doing it, because the safety level kind of keeps other people out, because you can degrade the safety also if someone can get in. So it's very unlikely that anyone can get past that, because that's also a human life risk if someone gets in.
Okay, I just keep thinking more general devices.
Yeah, the rules are a little different for SIS devices, I think.
Well, but I think that may be true, but you know, there are devices that do have firmware in them today. They're
Yeah.
smart
Oh, yeah.
devices, and that's why
Yeah,
I
they
thought,
all do. Yeah.
And if you update the software and somebody compromised that supplier and you're downloading something bad. What you can do with it, I don't know, but I mean, but you can be sure nobody's going to steal the information as it's communicated. That I get, and I think, but it's a big long. That's why I thought you made the point. It's end to end. You can't forget the device security itself, not just the security of the connectivity
Yeah.
to the device.
Yeah, good point. I think we had a question over here.
To the end user. Oh. So, but you have integrators in the middle of this whole mix. So these integrators are building systems. They are programming systems. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts about, I've done plenty of supply chain stuff on our end, and it's painful. Like you go through and they want to know all your security internally, everything. The utilities are very thorough, but then you have an integrator who's actually installing the hardware in an enclosure in a system that's going to be shipped to the end user. So there's a break in your chain. So how do you feel about the integration? Like integrators, are they going to have to follow some, like with the ISA? Are you guys going to then certify the integrator that they follow the same practices that we have in the factory? They're that last half mile till it gets to the end user.
Yeah, from our perspective, so, I showed that there is a standard, a 2-4 standard that addresses integrator practices or service provider practices. That's both integrators and on-site service providers who may be operating and maintaining the systems. So yeah, there's certification programs for them. We don't have it yet. We'll have it next year as we do the rollout, development and rollout of the asset owner site certification scheme. But I mean, it's not going to fix everything, but hopefully we're institutionalizing some practices, right? And certification brings attention to what you should be done and what's going to get inspected and the behaviors that are expected, and the third-party assessment organizations are doing those types of assessments and audits for that. But it's a long road, and when I left, you were talking about workforce development. That's a big issue. And one of the areas that really needs some attention is at the community college level, because all the wires and pliers guys are the ones putting this stuff in, and and maintaining it. And so I think there's a big, huge swath of education that needs to be done at that level, the tradesmen, and everything from HVAC to everything.
Okay, we'll take one more question over here in the corner.
Sorry, I just want to add a comment about the integration stuff. So just to reinforce what we do at Draeger is general engineers, they're at the very start of the project. We integrate with the IT department, all the other engineers, and then we design, build, and test all the way through the life cycle of the product to ensure cybersecurity is met and its integrity is there. And then we certify it at the end. So it's just, it's about getting integrators to join really the same chain that we do and ensure security all the way through. That's it.
Okay. Any last minute questions? Because we're kind of at the end. Thank you so much for all the questions. I know we had a small crowd in here, but I think all you guys are obviously very interested in cybersecurity, and a very good crowd that we have in here. And I want to thank our presenters. They did a great job, and our panelists. And again, thanks for emoting in Richard. I thought that worked out really well. So let's have a hand for our presenters, and I hope to see you all here next year.